My father told me at 19 that I was no longer his son, that I'd disgraced the family name, and threw me out with nothing because I came out as gay. And 8 years later, an anonymous phone call at 2 in the morning changed everything when a voice said, "Your father is dying and asking for you." But what I found at that hospital wasn't the reconciliation everyone expected. It was something that forced me to choose between forgiveness and the justice he'd never given me. My name is Darius Freeman. I'm 27 years old, and this is the story of how the man who destroyed my life with his rejection spent his final days learning that sometimes love has conditions, and those conditions include accountability for the pain you've caused. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, in a strict religious household. My father, Pastor Harold Freeman, led a prominent black church with a 1,000-member congregation. My mother, Dorothy, was the dutiful pastor's wife. I was their only son, groomed from childhood to follow in my father's footsteps. Every Sunday, I sat in the front pew, wore my best suit, smiled for the congregation. But I knew from age 12 I was different. I was attracted to boys, not girls. And in a church that preached conversion and deliverance from such things, that knowledge terrified me. I kept it hidden through high school, dated girls my parents approved of, played the role perfectly. But inside I was dying. At 19, during my freshman year at community college, I met someone named Jordan Chen. He was confident, open about being gay, and for the first time I felt seen. We started dating secretly. For 6 months, I lived a double life. Church on Sundays, time with Jordan when I could steal it. Then someone from church saw us together. By Sunday evening, my father knew. He called me into his office at home, the same office where he counseled congregation members. My mother sat beside him, looking devastated. He asked if it was true. I said yes. He said being gay was a choice, a sin, something that could be overcome through prayer and discipline. I said it wasn't a choice, it was who I was. He said, then you choose this lifestyle over your family. I'll never forget what happened next. He stood up, pulled an envelope from his desk, and handed it to me. Inside was a check for $500. He said, take this, pack your things, and leave. I asked if he was serious. He said as long as I insisted on living in sin, I was not welcome in his home or his church. My mother sat there crying but silent. I begged her to say something. She looked at my father, then back at me, and said nothing. I packed a duffel bag and left that night. The next years were survival mode. I couch surfed with Jordan initially, then got a studio apartment I could barely afford working retail. I finished my associate degree while working full-time, transferred to University of Memphis, graduated with a degree in social work. I built a life separate from my family. My father never called. My mother would text occasionally, asking if I'd reconsidered my choices. I stopped responding. They'd made their choice when they chose their beliefs over their son. I became a social worker, specializing in LGBTQ youth, helping kids who'd been rejected by families like mine. I knew their pain intimately. I volunteered at community centers, ran support groups, became an advocate. The work was meaningful, but the wound from my father never healed. People would ask if I had family. I'd say no. It was easier than explaining I had parents who considered me dead. Then at 2:13 a.m. on a Tuesday in November, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. A woman's voice said, "Is this Darius Freeman?" I said yes. She said, "I'm Nurse Patterson at Regional 1 Hospital. Your father, Harold Freeman, was admitted tonight with a massive heart attack. He's in critical condition and asking for you." I sat there, processing. 8 years of silence, and now he wanted me because he was dying. She said, "Will you come?" I said, "I don't know." She said, "He may not survive the night." I hung up. I called Jordan, now my partner of 7 years, told him what happened. He asked what I wanted to do. I said I didn't know. He said, "You don't owe him anything." I said, "I know." But some part of me needed to see him, needed to hear what he'd say after 8 years. I drove to the hospital at 3 a.m., my hands shaking on the steering wheel. My mother was in the ICU waiting room. When she saw me, she started crying, tried to hug me. I stepped back. I asked how he was. She said critical. They didn't know if he'd survive surgery. I asked why he wanted to see me. She said, "He's been talking about you, saying he needs to make things right." I felt anger rising. 8 years, and it took him dying to decide maybe rejecting his son was wrong. A doctor came out, said my father had survived surgery, but was weak. He could have one visitor, briefly. My mother started to stand. I said, "I'll go." She looked surprised. I walked into that ICU room and saw my father for the first time in 8 years. He looked old, frail, tubes and monitors everywhere. His eyes opened when I approached. He tried to speak. I said, "Don't. I need to talk first." I told him I came because the hospital called, not because I forgave him. I said, 8 years ago, he threw me out for being honest about who I was. He'd chosen his reputation over his son. I'd built a life without him, helped dozens of kids survive the same rejection he'd inflicted on me. I didn't need his approval anymore. But I needed him to know the cost of his choices. He tried to interrupt. I said, "No. You listen for once." I told him about sleeping in my car when I couldn't afford rent, about working 3 jobs to finish college, about the depression, the therapy, the years of believing I was worthless because my own father said so. I told him about the kids I'd counseled who'd attempted suicide after family rejection. I asked if he'd ever considered that his theology valued rules over people, that his church's stance on LGBTQ people was driving kids to despair. My father's eyes filled with tears. He managed to whisper, "I'm sorry." I said, "Sorry doesn't undo 8 years." He said, "I was wrong. I know that now." I asked what changed. He said he'd talked to other pastors, read different perspectives, realized his interpretation had caused harm. He said he wanted to make it right. I asked how. He said he'd written a letter to the church, admitting he was wrong about LGBTQ issues, that he'd rejected his son and spent years regretting it. He wanted to read it Sunday if he survived. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to forgive him. Part of me was furious. It took him dying to develop empathy. I said, "I need time." He said, "I understand." I left the room. My mother asked what happened. I said he apologized. She said, "Will you forgive him?" I said, "I don't know if I can." My father survived. He was hospitalized 3 weeks, then moved to rehabilitation. During that time, I visited twice. We talked carefully, old wounds too raw for easy reconciliation. He showed me the letter he'd written to the church. It was honest, vulnerable, acknowledged the harm his teachings had caused. He said he wanted to read it when he returned, but church leadership got wind of it. The associate pastors and deacons visited him in rehab. They said reading that letter would devastate the congregation, undermine the church's biblical stance, and they couldn't allow it. My father said he was still senior pastor. They said he was compromised by his illness and his judgment was impaired. They'd vote to remove him if he insisted on this path. My father called me that night. He said they were forcing him to choose between his leadership and his integrity. I said, "Sounds familiar." He said, "What do I do?" I said, "What you should have done 8 years ago. Choose your son over your reputation." He read the letter the following Sunday from his wheelchair. Half the congregation walked out. The deacons voted to remove him as senior pastor the next week. He lost his position, his salary, his identity. But something else happened. Families with LGBTQ kids who'd been suffering in silence reached out. Other congregants who disagreed with the church's stance but stayed quiet found their voices. A new church formed, smaller but more inclusive, and they asked my father to lead it. He did. It's called Grace Community Church now. It's grown to 200 members, many of them people hurt by traditional churches. My father and I have a relationship now. It's not what it was, and never will be. There's too much history, too much pain, but there's something honest in it. He attends Pride with me. He officiates same-sex weddings. He's become an advocate in ways I never expected. My mother came around slower, but she's learning. People ask if I forgive him. The truth is complicated. I've forgiven him enough to have a relationship, but I haven't forgotten. Every Father's Day, every family gathering, every moment where other people have uncomplicated relationships with their parents, I feel the ghost of those 8 years he stole. Forgiveness doesn't erase that. So here's my question for you. If your parent rejected you for being yourself, and years later they apologized after facing their own mortality, would you forgive them? Does the cost of their choices get erased by late life growth? And if you'd been offered that phone call, would you have gone to the hospital or let them die with their regret? Drop your answer in the comments.